But welcome everyone to a celebration of poets Amy Holman, Silvina López Medin, Ruth Danon, Tiffany Troy, and Ellen Devlin. My name is Sophia Bannister. I work closely with our program director, Jennifer Franklin. I'm thrilled to have you here in person in our beautiful Phillips Manor train station in Sleepy Hollow. I want to thank our founder, the award-winning poet Margot Taft-Stever, whose vision and hard work are responsible for the Hudson Valley Writers Center embarking on its 35th year. I want to thank the board, the members, our students and teachers who are the beating heart of the center, and our generous funders, NYSCA and Arts Westchester, as well as the foundations who support us, including Bidel, David G. Taft, Lucille and Paul Maslin, Gannett, St. Faith's House, Alan B. Silvka Foundation, NY Community Trust, and Zand Charitable Trust. And thank you to my colleagues, Jennifer Franklin, Christina Papadopoulos, and Misty Yarnell for all their hard work and vision of bringing poetry and prose to an ever-growing audience, both in person and by Zoom. If this is your first time joining us for a reading, thank you for being here and welcome. First to read for us this afternoon is Ellen Devlin. Ellen Devlin is the author of 2 chapbooks, Rita and Heavenly Bodies at the Met. Her poems can be found in the Cortland Review, Ekphrasis, Lime Hawk Review, New Ohio Review, Pank, Poet Lore, The Lost River Review, The Sow's-Ear, Women's Studies Quarterly Review, Westchester Review, and other journals, most recently Mule Skinner and Beyond Words. Ellen Devlin.
Is this where it should be? Yes? Okay. Thank you all for coming on a ridiculous rainy night. And I would like to acknowledge that Hudson Valley Writers Center is where I learned to write. And among us here is one of my first and finest teachers, Amy Holman. And in 2018, the Metropolitan Museum of Art held an exhibit called Heavenly Bodies at the Met. The bulk of it were couture from all over the world, the only qualification being it had to have some kind of Catholic iconography. That was the theme. The first time I saw it, this big hall with these magnificent pieces, I started to cry. And I love art, but I've never cried. And so I just knew there must be something very compelling here for me. So I went back 28 times between there and the cloisters to stand with the pieces and just look at them and listen to them till I knew what they wanted to say to me. I named each poem after the name that the designer gave to the piece. Guadalupe, Evening Dress, Jean-Paul Gaultier, designer. Grieving Mother Mary, your silk heart sheathes a small dagger. Blue Jersey Mary, you draw us close, make us yearn for you. Who doesn't want a mother who pierces her own heart for us, pours out her silk blood, red, shimmering, wet, as if it just happened, as if it always just happened. Another one from John Galliano, designer. Warrior Queen, lying in state. Do you keep or forget linden trees combed by sunlight and the flight of crows? What do the dead want, carrying their swords or babies or the pair they were eating into the abyss? Warrior Queen, lying in state, silver-threaded, black-gowned, a crystal crown of seahorses, one side of your body armored, one open. Nothing protected you floating forever now, buried in the detritus of ocean floor, sightless. Is sound a silver-handled mirror? Is almond the taste of stillness? Rick Owens, designer. The name of the piece is Ensemble. A monk's robe, brown broadcloth, a hole cut in the tunic below the waist. I was 13, kneeling in a confessional. You asked me where I was touched, on which parts of my body. How many times? I stopped answering. You leaned your sweat-slicked head into the lattice window between us. The wet wool smell of your cassock, your cigarette breath pushed into the small divide between us. I had no name for the cold fear your anticipation breathed through my body. Wedding Ensemble. Cristobal Balenciaga, designer. I have been this bride, soft circle of veil and gardenia. This is how to begin. In the church that houses the devotion of my ancestors, here nested in my parents' hope, poinsettias, evergreen garlands. I was alone, swathed in white silk, a mournful Ave Maria. The pointy toes of my shoes caught twice on my dress. Do I want this? Pulsing against the seed pearl headpiece. There's a tradition of the bride leaving her bouquet at Mary's altar. Ringed and wed, I gave the flowers to my mother. Skirts rustled and throats cleared. My mother, startled, leaned back from the kiss. It snowed that day. What else? All these papers. Okay. Alexander McQueen, designer. The name of the piece is Dress. The mini dress imprinted with Bosch's hell. Frog demons saute human parts in frying pans. Birds with snouts dunk naked sinners into melted metal coins. I turn away and turn back, an oily fear in my throat, remembering my child's terror of a child's sins, sealing my sleep with nightmares. Breastplate. Alexander McQueen, designer, and Sean Lean, silversmith. Among the reliquaries, a breastplate molded to a woman's torso. Silver roses abundant bloom from her shoulders, cross breasts and hips with botanical precision. The casing of her holiness, the beating heart of a living woman. That's enough of that, yeah? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Next up to read, we have Tiffany Troy, the author of Dominus and the chapbook When Ilium Burns, as well as co-translator of Santiago Acosta's The Coming Desert, in collaboration with Acosta and the Women in Translation Project at the University of Wisconsin. Her reviews and interviews of emerging and established voices are published or forthcoming in the Adroit Journal, the Cortland Review, the Los Angeles Review, Matter, the Laurel Review, Eco-Theo Review, Rain Taxi, New World Writing, Hong Kong Review of Books, and Tupelo Quarterly, where she serves as managing editor.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here among friends, Ode and you. Thank you to Jennifer Franklin for inviting me, as well as the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I'll be reading 5 poems. Pretext. As I made my way out of the double-bind maze and called relevance and space out for what they were, it was Saturday. It struck me as I watched the snow fall that we were never entirely forsaken. Maria Goretti stands straight in knee socks in the cold. Miracles fit for a baby tiger. A stargazer lilies stand for unwavering faith, and the cutthroat day to day dyes our hair first silver, then white. Out my window, I never see the sun, but its reflection on the white building between brick tenements. Once upon a time, when I saw snow, I prayed for a snow day. Now, snow is mercy to the condemned. I wonder if snow meant I could trust that the crooked paths could be made straight again in our ethnic enclave on the Stark parking lot, on the concrete, inside the barbed wires, overlooking the colorful shops. Snow blankets our vision the way parishioners present Maria with sunflowers to honor her faith. I smile, remembering a client's hope for all workers to receive what they deserve before continuing on my way. A thank you card, and I'm going to denote the different sections with my hand. All right. The friend told the nurse that he believed in her during the lengthy walk they took along the river, and it's actually the riverside. So anyway, how could you think of me as duplicitous? The river intensified the nausea, but most of all, the guilt that no Black Forest cake or clam chowder could ever fix. Soon the nurse realized that the only one she trusted who cared so much about patients dying from the higher-ups' cover-ups was following a rot script which read, "Break her." She could no longer look herself in the mirror. "Can't this wait till normal business hours?" he asked. "No," she said. "People are fucking dying." The Friends was two persons in one, a kind friend and a co-doctor. The nurse protested that people were dying. "You are being too sensitive. Can't you move on?" As the friend lied through his teeth, the nurse sought to sweep minds with her toes. She ate mounds of chocolate instead of lunch. Her mama took away the chocolate box and cooed. Still, the helplessness gnawed at her spirit. She scolded, she pleaded, she even threatened, everything but falling to her knees and kowtowing. Still, the friend didn't budge, calling it an interpersonal conflict turned legitimate concern. A 3-hour walk later, she couldn't coat her upset with honey. Pinned to a compass rose by the doctor, the nurse heard herself being accused of poor communication when wasn't the problem that she made herself too clear? The friend took her back into the emerald greenhouse blindfolded. She was slapped for not finding the bedroom, knocked out for complaining about the faulty mental map. The friend fed her elixir of comfort as she grew dependent. The doctors first removed her by removing her from the practice group, then by creating a new group without her. She realized no prayer will ever do anything if the bureaucrat is leading the decent human in you by the nose. Inexperienced and unattuned to the industry, she said no to the Friends' pill for the third time and prayed. The friend cursed just like Master, who planned the future with Odyssean cunning. The friend took long, fast strides. He bent low to help the patients to their feet while the other doctors stood by. The friend told the nurse he could never say what he meant when he was her only way out of this double-bind maze. She wasn't blind to the little favors he did for Mama, which disoriented her. If only he could stop his off-script kindness. Was that too part of the game? Toward the end, the nurse got the friend a card with forget-me-nots, a gray-blue color of his eyes. Nowadays, she imitates his style and signs off in kindness and with respect. This will likely be our last meeting as friends because I can no longer trust you. The nurse put the card away in her drawer before taking it out and putting it back again. She saw in the gray-blue petals the friend and the patience. She downed Mama's Earl Grey with too much cream. She didn't say this to friend, but she would still jump in the lake if drowning was his happily ever after. But she couldn't wave the white flags. She must stay sane to listen to that ever louder clangor, to see with her eyes that vain duplicity. The bluebells bloom and shred her soul into cardstock pieces. Imagine the sky without twilight, no dawn or dusk, just pure darkness, no moon. In that solitude, every bit of your body vibrates and a voice tells you, you are nobody. You are an egg to be cracked open and your yolk fried golden, then consumed. You cracked as Mama held you, a nobody, not Odysseus under sheepskin, his mouth still warm from Circe's breasts, his heart still lingering under the shadow cast under which he once saw Penelope's face clearly. You hold tight to chisel the impression of the clouds standing free like deities with titanium white mixed with some gray in the baby blue sky. Sometimes, when you are so perturbed by the voice at midnight turning to cast blame, tapping on your shoulder, asking why you haven't done enough, you feel your split nails hurting your nerves most acutely. Your center breaks and all you wish for is light to shine upon your wide open eyes. As you wait patiently, you feel your heart harden, no longer gooey, but baked. The depths of your soul still golden and complicit because even after they gagged you, you felt for management, which asked, "Excuse me, but do you believe wrongdoing happened under your watch?" Telos. Mama, I don't pick fights with anyone, but if my telos as master's disciple is to be a megaphone for others, don't you wonder what happens if when I speak, all I hear are echoes? In high school, running all the way to Chambers, I laughed as I caught the train back home to Papa. I did not know behind his smile was rage, which, like Isaiah's, was rooted in the wrongness of the world. One day, a man with tanned elbows swirled his knuckles in my waist through my down jacket. I looked at the man across from me to say something. I walked to the other side of the train at Queensboro. Later, when a man pressed my neck against the wall, twisting my arms like rubber, I knew better than to look around for sympathy. I struggled to get loose from his hands. Slowly, I jumped through rocks with scraped knees, learning why the Spartans left their young out. When I learned those eyes went after my dear friend too, I felt relief before rage. I learned to play with the coins in my hand. The enemies I slay are not dragons, but scarecrows I burn for every girl I ever was, every girl who thought she had wronged the world by existing. Okay, this will be the last poem. It's called Plus Outre. In the stained glass factory, the glazier pinned the violet upon the crucible with purple and gold set upon the metal frame. She dabs molten glass into the lapis lazuli, not by choice, but necessity, as heat melts the ultramarine, le plus ultra. The sea of the sky beacons, broken by the rising sun. The great-granddaughter of the glazier does not remember the waves of the Hudson River, only the echoes of failed pronouncements at Ellis Island, reverberating years later as she frames the drone frequenting the low skyline. In the intimacy of disparate parts, the girl whispers into the ears of the passerby, fractals of true artistry that went beyond the intensity thought possible in photographs. As centuries pass upon the metamorphic bedrock filled with towers of Babel made of glass and steel. The lore of fables which once bound rapt audiences are now long forgotten. On the subway, the girl studies photographs at sites she beheld, the smell of unwashed bodies and marijuana and refashioned vintage 7 trains. She thinks of how she is the last of her tribe. Memories of her lineage hug her leg like cold air when the train door opens, fickle like the red twin trees in her night lamp, or memories of downing defrosted frozen fruits, their sugar already gone. In a lab of molten glass, her fingers burn like Prometheus's fire. Gatsby's junkyard, once shown proud with a unisphere, now a swamp for Canada geese and mallard ducks. The girl walks as steam rises to occlude sight with fog, the color of mist in the grass. At home, the girl recounts the sun and its octagonal beauty, the life beneath the stillness of the turquoise green pond. Mama laughs before turning down the light and kissing the girl on her head, wishing her a kaleidoscope of sweet dreams.
Thank you, Tiffany. Ruth Danon is the author of 4 books of poetry: Turn Up the Heat, Word Has It, Limitless Tiny Boat, and Triangulation from a Known Point. Her book of literary criticism, Work in the English Novel, was reissued by Routledge in 2020. Recently, her work was selected as a finalist in Tupelo Quarterly's 4 Quartets project, and Robert Creeley selected one of her poems for inclusion in Best American Poetry 2002. She is the founder of Live Writing, a project for the reading, writing, and performance of poetry. Ruth Danon.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm so honored to be at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and it's just thrilling to be here. Can I manage this? Yes, I can. So you'll see that I have a book. Here it is. And I have papers. And the thing that I did is, because I can't flip pages gracefully, I put my poems on sheets of paper. But all the poems are from the book. I really did write the book. There are a couple of things you need to know, and then I'm just going to read poems for the most part. This book is poems were written before, during, and after the height of the pandemic. The locations are 2. There's the Hudson Valley, and there's Sardinia, which is where I went right before the pandemic. You need to know that I hate the cold. I mean, I really hate the cold. And you also need to know that there are some figures in the book, some characters in the book that are worth naming. One is Giordano Bruno, the 16th century heretic, and I would call him a scientist, who was burned at the stake in the Campo de Fiori in Rome in 1600. And the other one is St. Anthony of Egypt. St. Anthony of Egypt is not St. Anthony of Padua, who helps you find lost things. He is the saint of the desert. He's a saint of Egypt, and he is said to have stolen fire from the devil, and so he brought heat into the world. There are also some cats that appear from time to time. So most of the poems I'm going to read now today are set in the Hudson Valley. I thought that would be appropriate given that the location we're in. And I think that's all I need to say. Can you hear me, by the way? Yes. Okay, good. All right. If If I suddenly drop off, wave your hand in the air or shout or make noise or something. Okay, thank you. Time travel. Someday in what we now call the future, I will write a poem or an essay or a story that begins with a line, "That first winter, it snowed often, and I was already edging my way into being old." At that time in the future, I will no longer pass beyond what's called the dummy light to the other side of the street, to have delicate blonde streaks woven into my dyed brown hair. I will let myself turn silver and amazed. I will recall that I read mysteries one after another late into the night, hoping that they would help me understand betrayals I didn't yet understand. That winter of frequent snow, it was unconscionably cold, and I was also unconscionably cold, as if warmth would come at too high a price. That winter, the snow seemed beyond relief, clutched in the naked arms of trees. I was edging into age. I was tentative, like a young girl learning to line her eyes with shadow for the first time. That winter, the snow clung to the trees and tumbled into the river that rushed past the place where I lived. The frame. The machinery of the house isn't working. The word repair comes to mind. The dishwasher comes to mind. Something broke. Now something makes noise, sort of a whine or a cry or a mew. It was my doing. I mean, I broke off some small part of the machine without ill intention. The light flickers, or my eyes blink. I remember that once I wanted a bird bath or a fountain. I remember the flash of a cardinal, the extended wings of a hawk. In the next poem, we have a cat. Vectors. Ella, the cat, on the ledge, on the edge of discovery. Her eyes follow an uncharacteristic helicopter until it flies out of the window frame. A matter of prepositions, or the novel proposition that what remains outside of direct perception is a lure of sorts. See the turn of head, the arched neck, the quivering body of the small cat, her hunt for what can't be seen or known. I love what's off the edge of the page. It leads somewhere. Now the helicopter gone, now the empty gray sky. The quivering persists till late in the day. Okay, we're now going to jump the pond. We're going to Sardinia. And this is the feast day of St. Anthony in Sardinia. They create an enormous bonfire. And the mound is taller than this building, and there's a tree that sticks out from the middle of the mound. And when I saw that, I thought of Giordano Bruno, the statue of Giordano Bruno in the Campo dei Fiori. And so this is one of the poems coming out of that, St. Anthony's Fire. Rosemary, cork, oak myrtle, sweet eucalyptus, pine branches upon fir branches, a mound piled taller than I am, taller than the house I live in, and from the center, one living tree bare of branches, proud as Giordano Bruno in the Campo dei Fiori, a man tall and cowled. They burned him for thinking too much of infinite earth, every star a sun. In Galtali, in the center of town, they light the fire slowly. It starts to burn, one side bright, one side shadow, always and in all things, one side bright and one side shadow. And now I must go, they say, 3 times around the fire, until I sweat like the devil in the heat, until I taste the first fist of hot ash in my bitten mouth. So this next poem brings together Sardinia and the Hudson Valley and concerns sheep. Pastoral. Round stones could be sheep. Round sheep could be stones. Once in a while, the stones move. Sheep, or the slow movement of stones sliding over silt after we stopped looking. Small town Zuihitsu. Zuihitsu is a Japanese form, and its aim is to give the illusion of spontaneity. The illusion of spontaneity. Usually these days, I write late at night, after dinner, after the cats are fed, after my bath, after the small cat cuddles, after my husband sleeps, before I do. But now it is dusk. Earlier, the sun turned the mountain I see from my window a reddish tone, not red, not brown, not the gold of the fall, but an almost red, an almost blush. The white branches of birch trees trace bright lines against the oncoming dark. I am training myself to see. To see implies action and a willingness to leave the boundaries of my own thought. Earlier, I was thinking of how I love to teach my students about deductive and inductive logic. I would ask, do you know the difference? And one bored but smart student would say, as if repeating a mantra, inductive is going from the specific to the general, deductive is going from the general to the specific. Gotcha, I'd think. No, not quite, I'd say politely. And then I would explain. Inductive thinking requires the enigma of evidence. You count the number of stars in the night sky, you count, and finally you come up with a specific number, and then you can say, qualifying the claim to institute the possibility of doubt, that there are more, certainly more than 1 million stars in the visible universe. I make no claims for the invisible. But deductive reasoning proceeds from propositions. One sentence leads to the next. Deduction is a closed system operating in the world of language. In the deductive universe, something might be true but not valid, or valid but not true. As I see it, deductive logic is a language game, while the other, inductive logic, is a form of prepositional movement. You must move the evidence from one place, the data, in this case the stars, to another, the inference that there are more than 1 million. From here to there is a long distance. Prepositions are a sneaky way of implying verbs. That is a proposition. Giordano Bruno knew there were an infinite number of stars, each one circling around its very own sun. Even stars need attachment. Now the sky has turned a vivid blue and the birches have disappeared. The mountain is a mere outline. Not everyone has a clear picture of the limitations of the choices I've offered. 1, fetishize the observable world, or 2, become trapped in the limits of the propositional. A false binary. Rather, say simply, night, sky, stars, limit, solitude. And then back I am where I was in the beginning, alone in my house, as voices on the street fade away. Hawks. Name the elements of the observation: swooping birds, blank sky. Advance to some form of naming. Say hawk, say arc, make blank equal white. Pair the hawk with the sky and imagine flight as a kind of writing. The sky stays white until the hawks fly, soar, swoop, arc in great asemic loops. Hawks, tell me a story. Time passes, long enough for someone to die. The sky fills, Read until the white sky turns gray, until everything blurs. Just two more. I thought this book was going to be about gambling, but it wasn't. Gambles. Lately, I turn on all the lights in the house, betting on illumination to be literal. Light leads the way from one room to the next. Eyes adjust to dim light. Long tunnel. That cliche. The light at the end, etc. Pretty far off. The temerity of small animals, their tenacity and mine. What I gain or lose, a bet, time will tell, another cliche. I study new lines in my forehead. The punchline of the joke, buy the lottery ticket. I was supposed to do that. Instead, I consider the unmade bed and the luxury of disorder, the tuft of cotton at the edge of the rug, always at the edge of something. When I skip over the border, my number comes up. Now what's off the edge of the page causes a change of direction. Can I say it? Out I went with the bathwater, that primal disaster. All bets off. Cause and effect, an abject relationship to this fact, never to have been wanted. Pathos, the clumsily written headline in the local paper, 2 children hit by a car eating ice cream. The fact, the child's foot was caught under the wheel of the car. Another fact, this time nobody died. Nevertheless, it's safe to bet there's always a need for one form of extrication or another. Would you have liked me better if I had gambled nothing? I'm going to read the last poem in the book. So I started with the first and ended with the last. Verdict. All your precious beauty does no good in the court of dismay, where betrayal reveals itself for what it is, the way you notice the thread you pulled from your new sweater or the hole in the toe of the sock of your right foot. Better now to notice that the room is cold. Better to turn on the light as if the light could magically become heat. And it does. When you plug in the small radiator that signals its service, when you float bright red symbols of flame across its surface, you make do with what you have and who you are. The light outside the courtroom surprises you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. Silvina López Medin was born in Buenos Aires and lives in New York. Her books of poetry include La Noche de los Bueyes, winner of the Loewe Foundation International Young Poetry Prize, Esa sal en la lengua para decir manglar, 62 brazadas, and Excursion. Excursion was selected by Mary Jo Bang as the winner of the 2019 Oversound Chapbook Prize. Her hybrid poetry book, Poem That Never Ends, was a winner of the 2019 Essay Press Contest. She co-translated Anne Carson's Eros and the Bittersweet and Home Movies, a book by Robert Haas, into Spanish. She holds an MFA in creative writing from NYU, is an editor at Ugly Duckling Presse, and she teaches bilingual poetry workshops here at the Hudson Valley Writers Center.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. It's a pleasure to be here in person. I have read virtually for the Hudson Valley Writers Center, but I have never been reading here in person. Thank you for being here. I see some familiar faces with whom we have shared creative spaces, so it's special to be here. I'm gonna read some poems from this book that's called That Salt on the Tongue to Say Mangrove. In Spanish, Esa sal en la lengua para decir manglar. That was translated by Jasmine Bailey. And then I'm gonna read from this other book. At this moment, I'm in between what I call in between books stage, which sometimes can be a bit difficult. So there's a Argentine poet, Olga Orozco, who her ritual was to hold on to a stone to write. And I chose a couple poems that have stones in them as a way of holding. Conversation. I memorized all the ways the body could fit into words, how to make from a hint of laughter a lightning bolt, engraving every so often my own name, looking for the stone's sure center from which you can jump to the other shore. I had done everything, no, everything out of step, like someone who sees a sign that warns of a mountain and stones falling. I didn't know how to stop that crumbling. Tradition. This feel like very short poems besides my other book. It's very different. Tradition. The artifact my father fashioned, a V-shaped branch and piece of rubber, when at the edge of the neighborhood there was a river and kids played target practice on birds. I've left it fall into some lost corner. I let the stones gather dust. And I'm going to read a couple poems from a sequence that's called Pentimento. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but it's physical evidence in a painting that shows that the artist has altered the work, usually reflecting a shift in intentions. Basically, when paintings are x-rayed, sometimes you can see the traces going some other way. This sequence I wrote after many years when I was unable to write poetry and I turned to theater instead. And I wrote a manuscript that didn't somehow work. And this sequence I wrote from the remainders of that project that didn't work. And it's called Pentimento. I'm totally lost with time, of course. Sorry. So it has 17 poems and I'll read some of them. Very short. 1. What doesn't fit, what sounds like a torn page is a torn page. And those glimmers of light are fissures redeemed with Scotch tape. And this is a form of desperation, the nail that scratches searching for the seam. 2. There's one X for the unknown you can solve for. There's another that is a measured way of crossing out. The former stands out. And then there is another letter that stutters in hypoxia, asphyxia, anoxia. In other words, when you can't get your breath. Now this, something building up in all this paper, cuts off my breathing. 3. There is no time to wait for the clarity time brings. I candle scraps of paper. Is this a letter? I wonder at the feet of an insect still twitching, the impulse to finish it off. This is a sequence that alternates between the creative process and a specific scene. 4. A man, a woman, a house facing a lake. Traces of a text abandoned, like those stones from the beach that you gather, all the while knowing you'll cast them off. How to build anything on the soft earth the lake leaves behind. Those logs were pilings. They seemed to reach into the earth's hard core. A woman sits on the wood, smokes, thinking rubble. Did what you're writing happen to you? Shh, a lake carries you nowhere. What's more, it's a swamp, a depth that founders, doesn't let me touch the bottom, doesn't let me go, like a mouth swallowing words. 11. One way to stock your courage, make up a bout of bravery, like someone who cuts wits with the rest of a handheld blade. That leaf against the wind says, let go, let go. It doesn't matter in the end what you lose, the blade in the stalks, long as letters that cripple in the rush, the last to fulfill that impulse. There's something artificial in this, to say the couple facing the lake or the glass that spills onto the notebook, turning the water black. Before, at the merest rustle of a branch, that woman would have imagined a scene of reunion. Now a branch snapping is a branch snapping, purest repetition. The woman on the shore fingers within her coat the weight of stones. The lake infects me with its stillness. If this were the sea, I would do what you do before the sea, follow its movements, its talent for permanent erasure. The story falls short. A man, a woman, a lake, a line falls short, fails to go past the tongue. I want to say stroke, from fist to caress. The scale unfolds, the gesture unfolds, never resolves from counter. This is the last one in this sequence. Did what you are written, sorry, my God, this is a translation. Did what you are writing happen to you? No other way to say lake. Did what you are writing happen to you? Warp the lake, make it a pond, something forgotten, empty. Did what you're writing happen to you? Swimming is pushing water the same way we push words to different rhythms, and what remains is to dive to the bottom. You hold your breath to later say, I was there, and what it's about is a lake. Thank you, and I'm going to read. Sorry for those who already listened to me reading from this book, but it's here, so I want to read a bit from it. This is a very different book. It's a hybrid book that combines images and text, and where I trace a sequence of mothers, my mother, my grandmother, and myself as a mother. The sound of blinds being pulled up is the first sound. It's in your hands, the weight of the slats, all slightly bent to one side, as someone that bends with their ear towards the other, trying to hear more. What? Your grandmother, like your mother, could only hear 30% of all things. You cross out the word grandmother, you'll say your mother's mother. You'd rather have the word repeated, mother, build a chain with no missing ring. You're not pulling yet, but it's in your hands, the chain that raises the metal slats. You hear what your mother's mother wouldn't hear, the slats clattering. She, who used to live between blades, her scissors silent to her, opening and closing on the cloth, cutting, until what? Until she reached an edge, a pair of eyes looking at her from the other side of the sewing table, her daughter, herself, a table, not flat, not smooth, the top filled with pieces of broken wood. Broken, can stick in your skin, a daughter, a table made of broken things, but varnished, protected, protective, like the blinds you are not yet pulling, to open and close, to cut until, to look up and see someone, not knowing what to do with the weight of a stir or the top of the table, sharp points that don't hurt, but shine, varnished, to separate the cloth just cut into pieces, This is not your daughter. This is not you. And yet you are a mother. She's your mother's mother. You're pulling. My watch does not understand the instability of February. I realize that now this only works with old watches and people who just have cell phones. Doesn't work anymore. My watch does not understand the instability of February. It keeps going as if today were the 29th. It says 29. So I have to change it manually. Pull the crown, push it in, pull again until what's hardest to find, the middle position, then rotate to the correct date, 1. March begins. March is the month in my mother's letter, one of the two my mother kept, one written in red ink, March 1980. The date is uncertain, looks like a 9 on top of a 5 or vice versa. As I stir, it changes from one to the other and back, so it still moves. 39 years later, her hesitation exists. A 4-day crack, like the vertical line that marks where the paper was folded, a line that pushes words apart. I write, at least we are doing well, recovering quite well. In this letter, my mother's mother writes as if she were trying to catch her breath while, like my watch, she keeps going. She uses no period for almost the entire page, for who would dare stop her? She says, your father. She says, his surgery. She says, complication twice, not as a fact, but as something to chase away. She goes on talking about my mother's soon-to-come son. She says, we might be able to travel, then leaves the uncertainty behind. She says, we'll be expecting your phone call. I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you. I see her body bent over the page that lies on her sewing table, red pen in hand, the same determined posture she had when mopping the floor in the middle of the night, the whole night, back forth, the distorted echo of a faraway dance, beyond any remnant of dust, any crease or crack in time, her grandson born days later, her husband until the next year, alive. I'm not sure, do you have the time? I totally forgot the time. 3 minutes, okay. I'll just read one last poem then. Okay. Sorry. I'm writing this in my head, my hands inside, gloves that don't match. I lose at least one from the pair per season and hold on to the other. That single glove left behind still contains the lost one. That is to say, on the winter break, I read Pascal Quignard. In every image, there's a missing image, says he. I add, in every sound, there's a missing sound. Say, my mother, how she, because of her hearing impairment, is permanently reconstructing sentences from fragments. Isn't that writing? I am walking the 9 blocks back home from the subway. It is minus 18 degrees, and I'll never know how to turn that into Fahrenheit, or how at times I focus on something so much as to become something else. Gloves prevent us from breaking apart. Gloves are not relevant in Buenos Aires. This cold does not exist. The kind that makes you turn not only your head, but your whole body just to look at what's coming. I did not write much back there, just brought a couple of summer images, my mother and I at night standing in front of a white wall, killing mosquitoes, my mother, my sons, I in the backyard, hurrying to take away the clothes from the clothesline and the light rain. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silvina. Finally, Amy Holman is the author of the collections Captive and Wrens Fly Through This Opened Window, as well as 4 poetry chapbooks. She had a micro-residency through NYC Poets Afloat on a historic barge in the New York harbor in April 2021. She has taught for many years at the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and she is one of the poetry editors at the Westchester Review. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, where she works as a literary consultant and writes the Substack newsletter What Where Literary Journals. Amy Holman.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I've taught here, I think, since the last millennium, in the 90s, first publishing and then poetry. And it's lovely to see some people who have taken my classes here. This is my newest book, Captive. There's no title poem. The subject, what is held captive and what captivates, applies to, in some way, to every poem in it. It would appear, though, that the tiger poem is the title, but I still say you get to choose what you think is the title poem. I'm going to start with the first poem, which is plays around with the language. There are collective nicknames for animals that the scientists use who are studying them. Snowies and blues. Where there is no accumulation, laced and soft, come flocks of snowies to shrub pine, wetlands, and dock. Is it a wish to speak a season's complete possibility, or make familiar an inclination to leave? Snowy egrets could be milk or paint egrets, trillium or salt egrets, but they descend softly, long necks and wing fans, each one a blizzard in a nickname. Is it their lurking extinction, their long millennial disintegration that turns blue whales to blues on our tongues? When they call it tracking blues, passing sonar over the hemispheres one by one, and ticking off fewer mammals than a population can trust, do they know they're speaking double? Whose blues permeate this air? Whose mammal memory haunts farthest? I think I have certainly given as a prompt to students to write something from the news. And I may have also given it to write something about a crime. And here's a poem with both. Also, there are, if you've watched British TV or movies and the men refer to the women as birds, well, it's not the animal. It's B-U-R-D, which is Old Scottish for young woman. So of course I had to play with that. Bird hearts racing. Already chestnut-bellied finches know confinement, held in men's hands, plus confusing wind, without their wingtips buffeted. When 34 are slotted in orange hair rollers, packed in a duffel carry-on, and flown to New York for bird racing. Not a contest of flight speeds, for wouldn't they always be taking it too far, undulating over each finish line and into canopies of the Parks Department's plantings? It's a competition of paired male songbirds, finches superior to any other, singing to win men thousands or hundreds, owners or betters. Bird emotions are controversial to some humans who specify these residual dinosaurs, yet the four-chambered hearts do allow fear. In Guyana, a man bicycles through heavily degraded former forest with a finch in his fist. The engine of the heart ignites in the breeze, and wings agitate a palm. Man in a room plays a tape of the T's and T's of the last winning finch, training his capture to sing the same best. Finches will want someone. They will tire of cover tunes. Where are their birds, these birds must wonder, their perfected songs of prowess and pure love exploding in the quiet air? In the remaining forests, the shes tune their ears to untutored males, each pair enraptured by their specificity. There are a lot of trapped animals in this book. There's also a thread of what is held captive is also fear. Fear various different ways. There are shyness poems like this one. There's also a series of unsolved arson poems, and that's also in this one. No one there. This was before the house we had went up in flames on that refuge in the dunes on the barrier isle, and when I could not be more than wind rattling the screen door to my friend's house. I played each day with the youngest two across from us, which was long before the house we had went up in flames in an unsolved crime of real estate envy, struck midwinter when no one was there. Why so shy? I can't say. That I could not be more than wind still rattles me. A voice, their older sibling, too lazy to descend, calls down, "Who's there?" I can't say, too shy. This was before the house we had went up in flames in an unkempt and belittling blaze, brazen between the wetlands and the vast Atlantic with its softening air. And how could I be not more than wind knocking? I asked my child self, who persevered and still got trapped, waiting until I was seen. This was before it all went up in flames, and when I could not be more than wind. Between the fluttering of the book, looking for poems when I've got them all marked here. There was up here for a while a contest, a coffee poem contest that was supposed to be for, and then if you won, you got a poem up on the, down, I guess, in the coffee shop down in Tarrytown. Well, I misunderstood. I thought it was supposed to be a coffee poem. And it's not, but I started to write it, and then while I was writing, I thought this could also be a hair salon poem, and then, but I wouldn't have even started if I hadn't thought that it was a coffee poem. So, also really a language poem, but anyway, very first world title, Sipping Cappuccino at the Hair Salon. Junko's espresso hair falls to a hesitancy above her hip. She can't bear to cut it and says when it grays, she won't cover it. I like the idea of the colorist who resists. I sip froth from a demi-tasse spoon, wait for my cappuccino to cool in its thick-walled white porcelain cup. The stylists reflected move in misremembered salsa steps around the heads they clip. More lowlights this time, I say, and point to one light swirl in the rough-hewn planks around the mirrors. She frowns. Junko blends bleach with colors, plasters a few hidden strands of my gray and faded blonde to a foil square she scores and folds. I desire to sip the roasted, spicy cappuccino before it gets cold and lean forward with half a head of flapping silver, Wrigley's packets, sterling birds. What happens to the used foil? Magpies poisoned by plucking glitter? Himitsu means secret in Japanese, Junko tells me, when I answer what kind of poetry I write with, I like hidden links and double meaning. I'd also said walnuts for color, not the shell, but nuanced like the nut. Why didn't I point to the beverage that translates to capuchin? Named not directly for the monkey with the highlights of intellect, but the hood of the friar secreted away with his haywire belief. Regardless, Junko gets it precisely. She makes me a himitsu. It would never have fit anyway on the board. There are 10 poems in this book that have to do with whales or dolphins. And, you know, because I'm not smart enough to be a marine biologist, so I have to go on ecotourism. But this one also has to do with, excuse me, language, the different definitions of fret. I don't include the fact that I was actually also fretting because Trump had just come to office, but excuse me. Fret. Midwinter, a fishing boat launches off beach in dawn's pastel sea fret. I spot a humpback breach at 7:44, first of our day, and deep enough out that an 8-story building could stand, golden cow-nosed ray skimming its roof. I'm taking the notes, water temp, Beaufort scale, geographic coordinates, glare. Red-billed tropic birds zoom past with long wisps of snowy plumes. This domain is leading. Without bombarding tech and attending to do, my mind's not a fretwork of distraction. This is the zone I'll protect, where pan-tropical spotted dolphins vie for fish, manta rays in conjugal tears fly and skiff the Pacific. Magnificent frigate birds stay with infinite currents. Hey, ocean, as we drop the hydrophone and listen for song, circulated from sinus to bone to larynx, in the whale poised upside down for querulous coos and orbison purrs, like fingers pressing the fret, I'm all yours. I'm doing what you did. Starting with the first one and ending with the second. No, you know, I don't. No. Let's not. It's not a go. This is an Upper Hudson poem. Intelligence. In shallow marsh beside the iron rails, an azure-crested wing-tipped heron stands, unmoved by the blur of itself writ large, azure-crested Amtrak coursing low, alert instead to small carp and green frogs. Did it catch in its complicated eye that telescopes and microscopes and blinks right through slippery surface glare, my open mouth in one passing square? Eyes open day one, even if all it sees are apertures of plume. Great blues hatch as compact chicks whose necks uncoil the evening of their second day, extending views. Actually, a folding vertebrae equips a keen, quick hunter. Our astute Ardea Herodias knows where to be unseen by what it wants and not, in cattails and bluing hues. It's not shy about a steel predator speeding a fixed course. At the optometrist, I too learned the brain chooses how it sees through multifocal contact lenses, the circles of remoteness and propinquity. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the groups. We don't have time for a very lengthy Q&A tonight, but if all of the poets would briefly like to come back up, I'm not sure if any of the poets have questions for each other. If not, I know I've got a question for all of you, but please come back up. What advice do you have for anyone who's putting together a collection of poems for the first time?
Yeah, the first thing that occurred to me was Tylenol. I think, yeah, it's not easily done, but it's a wonderful thing to do.
Virginia Conchin has this fabulous anthology called Marbles on the Floor. And in it, she has like a bunch of different poets describe how they put together their collection. So I think it's a great way to start. And my suggestion is to write a lot of poems and then sort of pick and choose sort of an arc or structure that you want to follow. Like the mainstream structure is sort of the 3-section structure and sort of the idea of the folio approach, which is to say the strongest poem first, strongest poem last in each of the sections. But some people don't like sections and they sort of see it as a way of enforcing, you know, what has come before. So I think it really depends on what you're working on.
My advice is don't do it alone. Get help.
Yeah.
Get help. You know, have readers, have people you trust, find an editor, do whatever you can. Don't do it alone. It's too hard.
I think giving readings are helpful. If you've got a reading that's maybe at least 10 minutes, because the poetry that you can put together to give that reading makes you see what associations can be made between them. I think among them, I think that it's good to have poems that they're speaking to each other as they go on. The way a poem generally ends and the next one begins is helpful. I do often, you have to have a lot of poems to sort of, that ones that you might be weeding out as well. I think of, although I've never actually done this, but I do think of the idea of those mortarless stone walls that farmers would use, where it was all based on the weight and size of the, it is like putting together a manuscript, because you would go along and it's going really well, and then you put this tiny stone on them, the whole thing comes down, and that's like what it's. But I think that it's good to sort of figure out there's an underground to what you're compiling, and there's an above ground, and you need to be attuned to it.
Yeah, I agree with all this that Dean said, and also I would some things I do is identify the different threads, like even highlight the different threads, and then think of the whole as a music record, and think of the different moments and atmospheres you would like to put together throughout the manuscript, or also as a movie, like different atmosphere. That's the way I usually.
I also think that every book is different.
Yes.
In other words, the way I put together my first book and the way I put together this last book, completely different. Well, I would say in the first book, I put it in 3 parts. I grouped poems by their similarities. Then another book, I used sequences of sequences. In this book, I was doing it much more recursively. I didn't want narrative and I didn't want themes. What I wanted was something that was recursive, so things would get introduced and then they would come back later on in the book. I also wanted the experience of the reader to be that when he or she flipped a page, it would be different. You know, it wouldn't be like, oh yeah, this poem is just like the last poem and it's just like the one that's following. I wanted there to be real surprise all the way through. So that was very different from my first book. Does that answer the
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I think it's surprisingly intuitive.
It
You know, I put them on the floor, and you spend a lot of time with those poems too. So you know the threads kind of pop out at you maybe, and just like that. Yep, you're next. Yep, you're next, and then the very important piece: give it to one or two or three people whose judgment you trust, and see if you managed it or not.
I also appreciated I once asked one of my mentors, how did she deal with the whole process? And she told me something that I found very helpful. She said, I cry a lot. And that was very important. It's okay. That's to everyone.
And from some movie about baseball, I think if it was easy, everyone would want to do it. So it's not, but it's a great pleasure in a weird way.
It's your poems. You
Yeah.
have to really listen to what you're, try not to impose something on your poems if you can. You can pay attention to really look at what other people are doing in their books, and that can inspire you and you can go towards that, but really pay attention to what your poems seem to be doing. And that takes a little time.
Thank you so much.